Singularity.
My name is Nicola, aka Socrates, and you're watching Singularity One-on-One. Singularity One-on-One is a regular podcast feature of Singularity weblog, where you can go and listen to it or download it in full. If you guys enjoy the show, you can help me make it better in several ways. You can simply go and write a review on iTunes, you can leave a comment on the blog or on YouTube, or you can just go and make a donation. Today, my guest on the show is Professor James D. Miller. James D. Miller is not only an associate professor of economics at Smith College, but he was also a speaker at the 2008 Singularity Summit. And by the way, it was one of the funniest and most entertaining, most informative sessions of the whole summit, in my view. So I recommend anyone to go and watch it. And he's also most recently the author of a very interesting new book on the singularity called Singularity Rising. Now, I've been reading this book, actually I finished it about 3 weeks ago, and so I wanted to invite James D. Miller to talk about his work today on the show. So James, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Nick.
Fantastic. So let's start our interview a little bit further back in time, because I want to find out not only what people do, but why they get to do it. So let me ask you this: why economics, and how did you end up being a professor in economics?
Sure. Well, I wanted to be a theoretical physicist, and I went to college with that intention. And I did well in physics, but I kind of realized that math was too much for me, that I could get A's, but I had to work really hard, and it wasn't for me. So I think like a lot of people end up being economists, I sort of went down where economics uses math, but you don't need to be quite as good at it. And so I sort of I took microeconomics and I loved it, and I realized it was sort of the right level for me, and I just pursued that.
That's very interesting. And then, okay, so you had love for physics, you weren't as brilliant in mathematics as you'd wanted to be, so you decided to do economics. But then why the jump from economics into technology in general, and especially the singularity in particular?
Sure. I really didn't intend on studying the singularity or even technology when I got my degree in economics, but I started thinking about the singularity and thinking about what would happen if we had smarter people, that this would just radically transform everything. And this was the key issue of our time, but almost no one was studying it. So I just started reading about the singularity and thinking about what would happen. I decided this is what I have to write on. This is what I care the most about right now. Mm-hmm. And virtually no other economist is interested in issues of intelligence enhancement.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, the only other economist or academic that I know of is one of my previous guests on the show, Professor Robin Hanson. But do you think that there is kind of a, I don't know, not suspicion is not the right word, but academia generally looks down on the technological singularity as sort of a fringe, non-academic issue, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've gotten a bit of trouble with that at my college. I have tenure, so they can't get rid of me, but my department doesn't think what I'm doing is serious economics. They don't object to, they're not saying this is particularly wrong, but they think that I should be doing more traditional work. Mm-hmm. So it's hurting me a little bit in my career. But I
have to say that as someone who spent about 8 years in academia myself, I found the same attitude in the Department of Political Science as well as in the Department of Philosophy myself. And those are a lot more flexible usually than the Department of Economics, I would say. So I'm not surprised from what you're telling me. Why do you think that's the case, though?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, part of it is harder for them to judge. If you're doing traditional work, then there's, given metrics, and they can see, if you're successful or not. Otherwise, it's a lot different from what other people are doing, and there's a suspicion that I'm just kind of writing science fiction novels but putting in some technology. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I think, the singularity does strike most people as being absurd. And I don't think, superficially it is. And so, you're sort of, when someone finds out what you're doing, you explain it to them for 5 minutes. It's sort of like, well, you're writing about what happens if we have magic fairies that come and take over the world. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to get people to spend the time to look at it enough to think it's worthwhile. And I'll say, I mean, the argument that really convinces me is even if there's like a 1% chance this stuff is right, it's worth a lot of people putting a lot of effort into studying it. But most people don't buy that, they're not willing to sort of accept that kind of Pascal mugging kind of approach.
Mm-hmm, because even though it arguably might be a low probability, the impact will be fundamentally radical.
Yeah, and it's worth a lot of academics putting a lot of time into it. And since almost no one does, I think it's an effective social use of my time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with you, and I very much applaud you for doing so, despite the friction that it is creating.
Well, I do have tenure, so I'm quite safe, and no one should feel sorry for me or anything.
Yeah. Thank God for tenure. I'm all for it. I mean, there's huge benefits to tenure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get a little bit deeper into the meat of the matter. If you can perhaps tell us what, in your view, is the definition of the singularity, because I've had a number of people on my show, and it seems everyone has a little bit different take on it overall.
Yeah, I define a singularity as a threshold of time in which either significantly smarter people or machine superintelligences radically transform civilization. Mm-hmm. So either we have very smart people or very smart machines, and they're doing a tremendous amount.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So then perhaps you can tell us what the Singularity Rising book is all about then.
Sure. The central thesis of the book is that there are lots of different ways we can have enhanced human intelligence or very smart machine intelligence, and there's tremendous military and economic benefits to doing so. And so we're almost certainly going to have this if we don't destroy ourselves, even if it's going to turn out very badly. So what I try to do in the book is I don't take a position, I don't say we're going to get emulations or a Kurzweilian merger necessarily, or an intelligence explosion. These are all possibilities. They're all reasonable. Yeah. But there's so many different approaches. There's such tremendous benefit to doing it, and we can get one without the other. There's not like there's one technology that we need, and if we don't get it, we won't get anything. That, a brighter future, our future with smarter beings is it's what we're headed for, unless something very bad happens to our civilization. Mm-hmm. So in the book, I try to outline maybe some of the consequences under different paths, but also what are the incentives to achieve these things. Yeah,
I have to say one of the things that I really enjoyed about your book is that, as you just said, you are laying out all the possibilities out there without necessarily committing to any single one, but with the sort of reasoning that any one of them has the potential of happening. Yeah. And it's really hard to weigh which one is the most likeliest. I mean, we can certainly guess which one would be, but there's no exact measurement.
No, and there's so many smart people studying the singularity, and they differ over which is more likely to happen. And when writing the book, I realized, God, people like Robin Hanson is so much smarter than I am, and he thinks this, but Eliezer Yudkowsky thinks this, and he's also smarter than I am, so how am I supposed to decide who is right? So I didn't try. I just said they both lay out possible futures.
Yeah, I like that approach. That's very much the Socratic approach. I know that I don't know. So I think it's a very good starting point, and the reason is that unless we realize, I think, our own ignorance, then we cannot start building up real knowledge. And perhaps that's one of the reasons that I really enjoyed your book.
Thank you.
But one thing that I didn't enjoy so much is that the print is such a small print, and some of the pages are so dense with a small print that it was kind of a little hard for me and exhausting on my eyes to read it. So I usually would go through a book like that in a couple of days, but this took me almost a week to get through.
Okay. I'll tell my publisher if there's another printing. I'll point out that.
Just maybe a little bit bigger font.
Yeah, okay.
Easier on the eyes. Maybe, I don't know, I'm used to reading online so much nowadays that, and online the paragraphing is much different. People make big gaps. So just as a side suggestion.
Okay, thanks.
But going back on topic, so you mentioned that, the military, what in the book you call the military race. But also, that reminds me, during the Singularity Summit, you were making an argument as to why we should be investing in defense contractors and general safety technologies. Mm-hmm. Would you lead us through that argument for a second? Give a little tip on investing on our...
Okay, sure. Well, the premise there is that in some point in the near future, it's going to become apparent that we're going to be able to live a very long time, that maybe we have a chance of living forever. And certainly we're not there now, but maybe in 15 years, scientists will be able to keep mice alive indefinitely and reverse aging. And a lot of people will say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to die when I'm 80. I could live a really long life. Mm-hmm. And suddenly when you have the prospect of living a long time, I think the cost of death goes way up to you. And you're really gonna care more about your government protecting you from crime or from other governments. And so I think that people who can provide safety technologies, they're going to do fairly well. We're also going to, be more afraid of other countries attacking us. I mean, if the benefits of our life go up, then the cost of dying goes up as well.
So do you think then, in that case, that people will become so risk-averse that nobody would want to volunteer to be, for example, a soldier, a policeman, or a firefighter? Because, if you die, you're dead forever. But
not no one, but I think fewer people will, and I think the risk premium will go up. Mm-hmm. Right now, when economists look at wages in different professions, we see that, all else equal, a greater risk of death in a profession means people get paid more. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to increase, which will, of course, create incentives for companies to create robots that can act in dangerous jobs, can act as firemen or, work agricultural equipment where there's a lot of danger. Mm-hmm. So I think there's definite role for that kind of technology.
I see. And then what would be the sort of general economic implications, let's say, regardless of which way we get to the singularity? I mean, okay, maybe we should stop there. Does it matter which of the ways that you sort of describe in the book is the way that we end up taking towards the singularity?
Yeah, it's going to matter a lot. The big way is savings. Let's imagine you've got a 30-year-old who's thinking of saving for retirement. That 30-year-old is saying, gee, I'm saving money, so maybe in 40 years I'll have a better life. Well, what if you expect between now and 40 years there's probably going to be a singularity? By some pass, if there's an intelligence explosion, probably your savings won't have any value because either the AI won't be friendly and it'll kill you, and so what if you save money? Or it'll bring some kind of weird utopia where money doesn't have value. Mm-hmm. So this is sort of the Singularity Institute view, I don't think there's a value of saving. Under Robin Hanson's view, where we have an emulation economy, he sees that interest rates will go up, so actually there's a greater value of savings because there'll be companies will be able to make tremendous investments, and also you won't be able to earn money off of working because there'll be these cheap emulations that'll compete with you. Mm-hmm. So if we get a Hanson's view of the singularity, you want to save a lot. You get sort of the Singularity Institute's view, you don't want to save. Ray Kurzweil's view is sort of in between, where his view is where you merge with machines. And there we're all probably going to be able to earn a lot of money. So it would be okay to have savings, but it wouldn't be that bad to reach the age of 70 and not have any savings if we have a Kurzweilian merger and we're super intelligent and healthy. Mm-hmm. So, how much, and unfortunately, let's imagine a lot of people expect there to be a singularity where having saved money won't help. Unfortunately, if everyone saves less, there's less investment, which actually could postpone the singularity. So expecting a singularity could cause a delay in the singularity because people decide not to save very much money. Mm-hmm. There's less investment, so you can get sort of weird.
I see. But then on the other hand, you need to have a certain degree of consumption in order to pay for all that technology too, right?
Yeah, you do need some consumption. But if everyone thought, gee, in 40 years, I'll either be dead or I'll live in a society where money has no value, mm-hmm. a lot of people would save less. And I think we'd go to the point where consumption would be too high from the view of maximizing innovation. Mm-hmm. Or we'd get less innovation than we do now.
I see. You've mentioned there Professor Robin Hanson, and one of the differences between your book and his book draft was that he foresees increasing huge rise in social disparities and inequality, Whereas in your book, you're actually seeing inequality falling.
Yeah.
How is that possible? And if you accept his argument, and where are the differences?
Well, I think if Robin is right about there being emulations, and that's the dominant form of intelligence enhancements, then he is right. That what will happen is, there'll be the people who aren't emulations won't be able to earn money off of their wages. Mm-hmm. And so all the income will come through either government transfers mm-hmm. or through their investment in the stock market. But I'm not certain, Robin, but I think we also, if the way we approach a singularity is that we get smarter people, and let's say we have Ray Kurzweil's approach where we merge with machines, I think we're likely to have technologies that have low marginal cost, where it might cost, $50 billion to develop a brain implant. And at first only really rich people will have it, but most of that cost will be the research and development and the safety tests. And then once we have it, it'll be relatively cheap. Mm-hmm. And most middle-class Americans will be able to afford it. And then eventually we'll get to the point where someone like Bill Gates could pay for 1 billion poor people to have it too. Mm-hmm. So it'll I think the technologies are likely to follow the path of cell phones, where there are peasants in Bangladesh who have cell phones, and they don't even have them through charity. They have them because they can afford it. Mm-hmm. I also think through other intelligence enhancement technologies, we're likely to have the U.S. government provide them for free to poor Americans, because I think liberals will want that for the quality of outcome, but conservatives will too, because there's a lot of social pathologies that go along with not being very bright. And there'll be a lot of conservatives who say, I'm willing to spend the $20,000 to give this kid this intelligence enhancement technology because he'll be less likely to mug me or be on welfare. Mm-hmm. So I think there'll be a broad American coalition. And we look at, our government spends tremendous amount on education for poor people. Yeah. And so if there's proof that these technologies would work. So I also, if you look at eugenics technologies, which I think there's a decent chance it might turn out that it becomes possible for parents to create kids that are going to have much higher IQs than anyone does now. Mm-hmm. At first, it will only be the rich who do that. But I think very quickly our government would subsidize that technology for everyone for the same reason that liberals would want equality of outcome and conservatives are going to want poorer people who are smarter. So I think eventually for that kind of technologies, we will have more equality, mm-hmm. at least in the United States. Now, internationally, it's tougher to say.
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify, to make sure I understand, you think that Robin Hanson's argument is a valid argument, but it's not necessarily a sound one, because if his premise is not correct, then his argument would fall apart. But if his premise is correct, then it will be valid.
I think Hanson's laid out a very realistic path. I think he puts a greater probability on that path occurring than I would. Mm-hmm. I think his path, there's enough likelihood that his work is very important and should be read by anyone interested in the future. But I think there's a very good chance we'll have an intelligence explosion before we have an emulation economy, like he suggested.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there might be a libertarian bias in that argument, in Hanson's argument, or is it just me misperceiving it?
I don't know. I mean, I am somewhat of a libertarian myself, so I might be answering this with my own bias.
That's okay.
But I think if Robin's scenario comes to pass, I think there's going to be powerful forces that push us to libertarianism. I mean, you get libertarianism if you have a lot of rich people who can easily escape the political jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. So the thing about emulations is an emulation city could just move. So let's imagine we have an emulation city in the United States and our government says, oh, wait, no, you guys, you got to pay a lot of taxes or we're going to put all these regulations on you. I think the emulations or the rich ones will say, fine, we're just going to move offshore or we'll go to Singapore. So I think if the assumptions behind Hanson's model hold out, it's really going to constrain what governments do, at least absent war. And Hanson doesn't really look at the war situation. He assumes we kind of have a peaceful world. So I think it's given his technological assumptions, his sort of libertarian bias is justified.
Yeah, I personally think that even if his assumptions are correct, there would be a lot of resistance to it.
There would, but
I don't think it would be a straightforward, peaceful transition. I think there might be a revolution, actually.
Yeah, I don't think an internal revolution could do it because the emulations could just leave. I think there would have to be, global powers saying, even if you go offshore, emulations will track you down and force you to pay taxes or force this on you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let me ask you the difference here, though, with respect to technological unemployment. How do you see that will play out? Because one of the things that bug me about Robin's argument is that people who are, who are basically relying on their wages to survive today, which is the vast majority of the population of the Earth, would sort of be at the edge of survival, physically speaking, and most likely would be sort of pushed very much to become emulations, because that might be the cheapest way for them to survive, or perhaps even the only way for them to survive.
I think that's the path we're likely to go on unless we come up with ways of enhancing human intelligence. That it just, I think that because of what machines can do, the value of being strong and hardworking is going to go down and down. And I think, especially in the United States, we're going to reach a point where most Americans won't be able to earn enough working throughout their lives to even pay for their health care and for their basic needs, and we're just going to have the government transferring more and more resources. The way around this would be if we get some way of making people smarter. And I think a lot of this is due to automation. It's also due to the international nature of our economy. I mean, if America says we're going to put an effective base on the minimal standard of living that's above what the average person in India or China can make, but then you have an international trade system where it's easy to ship goods, you've got very cheap manufacturing technologies. I just think, someone with an IQ of 100, even in 15 years from now, who's average work ethic isn't going to be able to earn enough. And eventually they're going to be subsidized more and more. And I think we should be honest about that and admit, let's just maybe have a system where we have sort of an honorable unemployment.
Honorable unemployment. What is that?
Yeah, honorable long-term. Let's say, again, we have somebody who, just by the time they're 16, we know they're never going to be smart enough to be able to earn more than it costs to maintain them. And we say, look, don't commit crimes, lead a decent life.
And we'll pay for you?
We'll pay for you, and we'll do it in a way where you should, preserve your self-respect. It's not that you're lazy. It's just that we happen to live in a world right now where even if you're very strong and hardworking, you're not going to earn enough to pay for your health care. And so be a good citizen, and we'll pay for you, and have a nice life.
That's funny, though, because you're a libertarian too, and yeah. That sounds like a welfare state arrangement to me.
Other people have pointed this out to me. It is kind of ironic, but this sort of technology might lead to a welfare state where we get smarter and smarter robots.
Would that be that utopia that you're referring to, that basically you don't have to work, all your needs are taken care of?
Yeah, I mean, the point of an economy is consumption. It's not work. I mean, we work to get stuff to consume. Mm-hmm. And if we can all live in a world where work is optional, you still can have a nice life. That is sort of it's not utopia, but it's pretty good.
Okay, so let's go back and let's figure out where's the critical junction which would determine which way things would go, whether the Robin Hanson way or this way of the utopian welfare state. How do we know which path are we along?
Well, I don't think Hanson's path is inconsistent with the utopian welfare state, as you think. Because under Hanson's path, you would make very little through wages, but I still think there could be a lot of government transfers. So what I think could happen under a Hanson's path is that we have emulations, and some are very rich, and let's say the government extracts 5% of what emulations do in taxes and wastes half of it, but transfers the other half to its citizens. Mm-hmm. There still could be enough wealth there where the average person in that society is much better off than the average American is now, or the average unemployed, biohuman. So as long as we can get government transfers, as long as that society is rich enough, there still could be enough wealth whereby sort of all the biohumans are better off. Now, under Hanson's view, we're still going to have a lot of poor emulations, and there's really no way around that. Mm-hmm. If it's very easy to make a copy of an emulation, then you'll do so if one can make a little bit of a surplus. So if it costs $1 to run an emulation, and you can make $1 and a penny through running it, then you'll run it, and it'll have very low substance wages. So I think there is no hope for the emulations to all be wealthy. That kind of goes, but the biohumans could be, because we don't produce very fast.
Yeah, I actually like that idea, that the biohumans, and I think that's a big difference actually, because for me, one of the other requirements to make this happen is not only the fact that our society has to be rich enough that we can tax and sort of transfer that wealth, but there has to be the political will and the political consensus that there ought to be a more equitable society.
I want to take issue. I don't think equity is important. It's more important for the absolute level of the poor. I mean, I would be quite happy
in that
with
sense. I mean, I didn't say it equity. Okay, I agree.
Okay, because if we have hundreds of trillions of emulations producing,
I don't mean communism. I mean like.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that you wouldn't be, as Robin put it, at the edge of survival, but in fact you would have that physical survival absolutely guaranteed for you. And what I like also is that you threw in the word honorable, which means that it wouldn't be, you wouldn't necessarily be looked down, and I think that in turn would create the possibility of people to spontaneously create intellectually, artistically, and in all kinds of other ways, because I would imagine, many people would end up being creative in all kinds of different ways when they're not occupied with work.
Oh, no, I think you're right. I mean, you'd have people doing things like fantasy football leagues or web comics, or there would be a lot of work people would do that you wouldn't be paid for, but people would form their own communities that would be enjoyable, or they'd form clans in World of Warcraft.
Yeah, for sure, World of Warcraft, but some others would do art, painting, photography, you name computer, virtual worlds, anything. They'll write books, they'll make movies, anything which, they can't do now because they're working and they're worried about daily survival. Yeah,
I think that would be a great world if that can't happen for the emulations, because there'll be too many of them. We won't be able to give all of them a high standard of living.
It's very interesting because you accept much of Robin's argument, and yet you end up, in my view, very notably different in the end than he is. Okay. So let me ask you this then. Is it fair to say at the same time, after having said this, is it fair to say that you kind of fear the singularity? Because that's the kind of feeling I got after reading the book.
I do fear it. I think if we go on Robin's approach, if we end up with an emulation economy, that's great. But I think, unfortunately, there's a very high chance we're going to have an intelligence explosion, whereby the first time someone creates a machine that's as smart as a human scientist, that machine figures out how to raise its own intelligence and explodes into something as above us in intelligence as we are from chimpanzees or even ants. And unfortunately, I think most likely the first superintelligence will extinguish the rest of our species, extinguish everyone and do things that we don't care about. For us to exist on Earth, there's only a very small number of conditions consistent with us to exist on Earth. So if we create a superintelligence that's capable of rearranging all of the molecules on Earth, there's only a tiny set of arrangements that creates a world that we can survive in, a world that we would value. So, a naive bet would be it probably will destroy us. We don't know what goals it will have, but for most possible goals, if you look at the space of all possible goals, for most of those goals, we don't exist. Also, if the laws of thermodynamics are correct, and they might not be, but if they are, there's a limited amount of free energy in the universe. And so a machine superintelligence allowing me to be alive for a few more minutes, that means it has less free energy, and it means it'll have a shorter lifespan. It'll be a little bit worse at achieving whatever goals it cares about. So unless the machine superintelligence has friendliness towards me as a goal, it will be in its interest to kill me. And that's kind of scary. So,
yeah, I've had a number of people on the show who have given us different chances of survival. So Michael Anisimov, I can't remember if he gave us 10 or 20%, but it was a very low percent, either 10 or 20% chances of survival. George Dvorsky, the first interview I did with him, gave us about 2%. So whereabouts do you stand on percentage?
That's tough. I would say maybe 1 in 3. And that's excluding things like, quantum immortality, and universe being infinite kind of thing.
33%.
Yeah, but that's a rough guess. It's hard. For me, the reason I'm the most pessimistic is Fermi's paradox, that the fact that we haven't encountered intelligent life means it's really difficult to create, for star systems to give birth to civilizations that colonize the galaxy. And why is that difficult? And one answer might be, well, you end up destroying yourself within 1,000 years of discovering calculus. And if it's true that most civilizations destroy themselves around our level, then we're very common observers. Mm-hmm. In contrast, if it's, almost no one ever gets to our level of development, but once they do, then they'll colonize the galaxy, then we're really rare. And in general, if you're uncertain of your position in the universe, it's better to assume you're common. And unfortunately, if we're common, that we're probably doomed. Because, if things continue the way they are, we're going to be colonizing the universe fairly soon.
Mm-hmm. George Dvorsky made pretty much the same argument stemming from the Fermi paradox, and his conclusion was 2% chance of survival.
Yeah.
But in your view, is there anything that we can do today to tip sort of the scale in our own favor?
Yeah, there is. I think I'm studying what it would take to create friendly AI. I think that should be the most important project of our species right now, is what does it mean to be friendly, to reduce this to mathematics, to have really solid proofs of what it would take for software to create an AI that would be friendly towards us.
Mm-hmm. So you're a big fan of the Singularity Institute, former Singularity Institute. What is it called now?
Machine Intelligence Research Institute. Yeah, no, I am a big fan. I dedicated my book to them.
Yes,
so
I saw.
Yeah, I think what they're doing is really important. Other projects are raising human intelligence. I mean, if we were smarter, we'd be better at figuring out how to create smart AI. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big fan of doing research into the genetics of intelligence. I would like there to be super smart people who are working on this software.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've interviewed Robert J. Sawyer, very well-known science fiction writer who wrote a trilogy called WWW, Wake, Watch, and Wonder. Mm-hmm. And it's about a rising AI. And he, on the other hand, is very optimistic about AI, and he puts a whole argument in his book. And just one of the reasons why he thinks we have a good chance of peacefully coexisting with such an AI is the fact that AI wouldn't have the sort of survival of the fittest evolutionary baggage that we do.
That's true, but that's not necessarily good. I mean, there's a vast set of goals, and you're saying that it wouldn't have this one tiny possible set of goals that we do, but there's so many others. I mean, that's like kind of saying an animal isn't an elephant. That still leaves a lot out there.
Yeah, and as I said, he makes a very, very sophisticated, very long argument, and he goes through many of the possibilities. Just thought I'd raise the point so that perhaps you could look at it and consider it. I think I read his book 2 or 3 years ago now, so I don't really remember the whole argument. But going back to the economics of the singularity, let me ask you this. In my view, capitalism is just like any other economic system. It's probably the best that we have, simply for a lack of a better alternative. But in its own right, it's not a very good system, it seems to me, for a number of reasons. I mean, there's overconsumption, overproduction. It requires constant growth, which means that, we exhaust the sort of the environment that we live in. And is it fair to say that if a singularity happens, then chances are we are going to enter a different mode of production altogether, a different economic system, one that's not based on scarcity as capitalism is, but perhaps one that's based on abundance, especially if we live in a digital world? Well,
I'm not sure. I mean, I think we might get a singleton arising out of a singularity in which it will dictate everything. One way, because it might want to kill everything, so there will only be one entity left. But I disagree with your premise. I would actually say capitalism is based upon freedom of contract, where what capitalism is that we can make a deal, and if no one else is hurt by the deal, then the deal goes through. And I would say in capitalism, I would hope it would survive. I don't think it is. I don't think scarcity is the prime issue of capitalism. I think it's people entering into voluntary arrangements.
Well, I agree with the voluntary arrangement part of the issue. That's why, in terms of social policy, I'm a libertarian myself. But isn't it paradoxical that we would undergo such a fundamental change, and yet, the economic mode wouldn't change in your view, but it would remain the same? I find that paradoxical, because every time we've seen, say, when we experienced the Industrial Revolution, we moved from the agrarian economy, from feudalism basically, into capitalism. Mm-hmm. Doesn't it make sense that the next time we have such a radical change again, we would switch from capitalism into whatever comes next?
I guess there is, yeah. There is a good chance we would change.
And yet you can keep that element that you just mentioned, the free contract between, free individuals, as long as it doesn't hurt a third party, right? I'm totally fine with that, but still, there's an awful lot of white space that, can be very different from capitalism that fits that definition.
I guess we shouldn't argue over definitions, but I would say as long as there's freedom, that really is capitalism. For me, that's the essence of it. But I do think, there probably will be enormous changes in everything, if for no other reason that we'll have a lot smarter people playing at the game. So it is likely that we'll have things that are very different. I don't know what that would be, other than to predict that we'll all be dead, which is, definitely not capitalism.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see here. Is there anything else that we're missing in terms of the economic implications of the impending singularity?
I think a big part of it is that competition is going to force political systems to promote it, or at least to stop it from not happening. That people talk about, we're going to try to, if robots keep stealing more and more human jobs, governments will try to stop that from happening. But I don't think that's possible, because if one country tries to restrict automation, it will just be left behind. Other countries will embrace it.
Yeah,
and same with intelligence enhancements, the same with eugenics. Yeah. There's debate, should we allow parents to raise the IQ of their children through genetic manipulation? And the answer is we're going to have to. Because if we don't, imagine the U.S. restricts eugenic technologies, but China promotes it, China subsidizes it. Well, gosh, the average Chinese kid is a standard deviation smarter than the average American kid. That will destroy our economy, and it will be so obvious, it'll be so bad that the political system, I don't think our political system would be stupid enough to allow it. So I think economic competition is forcing us towards a singularity, even if we don't want to go there.
Mm-hmm. I tend to agree very much with you. But personally speaking, do you take any steps to enhance yourself cognitively or otherwise?
Yeah, I've actually been doing a huge amount. I do something called neurofeedback, where there's electrodes are hooked up to my head, and my EEG is being monitored, and then my brain gets rewarded for producing desired frequencies. So, for example, I have too many what's called slow waves being produced right this part of my brain. And so that I don't think as well because of that. And so I have a home trainer where I for maybe an hour a week or so, I'll watch a screen and I'll hear a pleasant beep and see a part of a picture being filled in every time my brain is doing what it's supposed to, is producing fewer slow waves. And so this has sort of made me a clearer thinker. I'm also, I'm on a paleo diet. I think that helps. I sometimes take some cognitive enhancing drugs, and I do exercise. So I do that game. I'm dual and back occasionally.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Can you tell us the name of that technology or the product that you're using for brain enhancement, for the stimulation?
It's called Neurofeedback.
Neurofeedback.
Yeah, it's actually becoming more popular. I think it's something that almost everyone should do.
Very interesting. I haven't heard of that before. I have to do my homework on it. I'm, by the way, experimenting right now with the Paleo diet myself. So okay. I've been going through the different months the last few months and did vegan in January and then low fat. Now I'm doing paleo, so we'll see. And I'm doing cholesterol tests every month to see how that's going to impact things. James, I have to say I really appreciate this conversation with you today. And in closing, I want to ask you the last two traditional questions that I always ask. First is, where can people find more about you and your work? Where can they buy your book?
Sure. Well, I have a website, SingularityRising.com, and my book is, of course, available on Amazon. And you can look up me on jamesdmiller.org. I have my resume is there and links to a lot of stuff I've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have to say, though, I enjoyed the book, and I really appreciate all the ideas that you mapped out, I think, very well. And I think it's worth reading, and I recommend it. But if there's a single message, perhaps, that you'd like to summarize either from the book or in general, and you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from this conversation with you today, what would you like that to be?
Sure. Well, we're probably going to be entering a much smarter world, and you should think how you can prepare yourself for it. If you're very young, and you're mapping out your career, think, gee, how would I still have this career if machines are much better or much smarter at things than they are now? So one piece of advice, let's say you're thinking of learning Mandarin because you think Chinese is the language of the future. I'd argue that's a very bad career choice because we're almost certainly going to have translation programs that are extremely good in a decade from now. So that would be a bad career move. Think how you can survive and think how you can thrive in a world with very smart machines, in a world where people are smarter than they are today.
So give us a few ways. Are tenured professors going to be one way to survive in such a world? No,
I am worried about that. Actually, I wrote an article for an education journal about how, you just get tenure. Don't think you'll have a secure job for life because it's, online technology might destroy the education market. So, be prepared to switch jobs. Oh, something else I should suggest. Everyone, I would urge you, if you believe in the singularity, you should sign up for cryonics like I have. I'm a member of Alcor. Mm-hmm. If the singularity brings a utopia in which you can live for millions of years, you really, really want to maximize your chance of making it towards then. So don't risk dying before the singularity. So if you can afford it, go sign up for cryonics just in case you're going to die, and miss out on this truly great universe that we could inherit.
So your message is to basically do our best to prepare for the future.
Yes. For
a smart future where machines would be taking over most of the jobs that we're doing today.
Yes. And make sure you want to survive until then. And you want to, be able to thrive and, have a chance of earning a lot of money if that's the kind of thing you care about.
Mm-hmm. Well, James Miller, thank you very much for spending 45 minutes with us today.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed being on your program.
Singularity.